Welcome back to Hoochos. Today on Hoochos, I'm going to show you a revolutionary new way of growing this. This is the root vegetable that most Westerners don't know about. This is Japanese taro root. So in this video, I'm going to run you through 2.5 years of my hydroponic taro experiments. And we're going to use the knowledge that I've gained in that 2.5 years to design a hydroponic system for a revolutionary new way of growing taro. And finally, we'll do a hydroponic taro harvest using the techniques I show you in today's video. And let me tell you, it is a bumper crop. So for those who aren't familiar, this is taro, Colocasia esculenza. It is widely cultivated in Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific, and it has particular cultural significance to the Hawaiian people, where it's known as Kalo. As growers, this plant is of particular interest, not just because of its beauty, which it is an absolutely stunning plant, but every single part of this plant is edible. From the leaves, which you can use to wrap and steam food, to using as something like a cooked spinach substitute, to the stems, all the way down to the bulb of the plant, which is an edible root, and the corms, which look like this and are able to be eaten as somewhat of a potato substitute. So if I cut a corm open, I'll just show you, we have a starchy root, which is described to have the texture and flavor of potato with a nutty flavor to it, which sounds pretty bloody good. Now, there is one caveat to the whole plant being edible, and that is that you have to cook it to make it edible. The sap of taro contains calcium oxalate, and that is a skin irritant and a mild toxin until you cook the taro. This is actually not a bad thing for us as growers because it makes the plant extremely pest resistant, because the calcium oxalate, being an irritant to us, is also an irritant to anything that wants to eat it. So standard agricultural practices involve irrigated systems that supply water to a nutrient-filled soil-based media. Taro has a very high tolerance for waterlogged conditions, which makes it perfect for hydroponics. Okay, so for the setup of our hydroponic taro today, we are going to use a system that I actually set up about 4 or 5 years ago. However, I only used half of the setup. This is the float box hydroponic system. It's essentially a bagged media hydroponic system that I set up a frame that I would flood. So it would be perpetually flooded with water, and the bags would wick up into the grow media and supply the plants nutrients and water through the grow media. I think that this delivery method would be absolutely perfect for taro, because taro is a marshland plant. It absolutely thrives in waterlogged conditions, which makes it perfect for hydroponics. And one of the main concerns in taro growing is not supplying the plant enough water and nutrients. So when I set up the float box, I set up a secondary bed that was meant for a second float box system. However, the labor involved in setting up that system made me rethink doing a second system, because I actually hurt my back lifting those grow bags and all of the rock that I had put in there. So for this taro bed, we're going to use the second bed. You can see here, this is actually the revolutionary new method of growing ginger and turmeric, and these bags are actually chockers full of ginger that I've got to harvest, and turmeric over here, as you can see. But I digress. This is the bed in question, right? It's a bit worse for wear because it's been out in the elements for like 5 or 6 years. The bare bones, the frame, is what I'm after. So I'm going to lift this out, and then I can get to relaying this pond liner. Just move the sugar cane out of the way. And I'm just going to lay the pond liner down, and once you're happy with it, run a knife along it and we'll start securing our pond liner to our frame. And I'm just going to staple that into place. So this is my cameraman, Mr. Butcherbird. He loves hanging around, just waiting for bugs to come out when I'm working. So he's going to be filming today. And I've actually designed a 3D print for this system. So this is a float valve holder that's adjustable up and down, as well as the float valve being adjustable. This means that you can set the level on this system. So we can pick a corner and install this onto our wood, and then at any point in the future we can just slide a float valve in and then adjust the level of our float valve to what level we want the bed flooded perpetually at. So I'm just going to install this as high as possible and then put our float valve in and have our hose come out here and feed our system, gravity fed from the reservoir behind me. It may look like I am putting holes in the pond liner, and that's because I am. But this should seal with the pond liner behind it, so I wouldn't be too worried about this leaking at all. This can also be angled to whatever angle you like if you want to use the float valve at an angle too. So it's actually quite a useful 3D print. You don't have to screw it, you could glue it if you were using this in, like, say, a IBC. You could use a plastic glue to glue this to the side of IBC as well. We can put our float valve in. I'll have it at about this level, which is the second from the top. That allows the elbow to sort of be level for me, where at this height. I may have installed this too close to this edge because of the bloody, I'm not sure that the hose is going to be able to bend in that way. Yeah, so I'm going to bring that forward a bit. I shouldn't have done that, but I'm just going to seal those holes with screws again. So I've just sealed those up with some screws. And now we can connect up our hose. So this 3D print can be found on my Patreon as usual, same as all 3D prints shown on this channel. And the fittings can be found on my website hydroland.com.au if you're in Australia. Now, just gonna connect up our hose, clip it onto our float valve, like so. And now we can set up our reservoir to feed into this system. Okay, so this is the reservoir. I'm gonna fill it up with water. Here I've just got a hose clipped onto a really large float valve that will stop the flow if I forget that it's on. And that just goes down to my garden tap over there. And then I fill this 1,000 liters up. And once it's full, we can add in our nutrient. And as you can see, that feeds a garden hose splitter, and that feeds this hose that runs down to our float box system, as well as our new Taro flooded bed. Okay, so my reservoir is now full of water and we can add in our nutrient. So because Taro is able to grow in quite marshy, swamp-like conditions, it is able to handle a fairly high EC. In fact, 2.5 to 3.0 EC is absolutely fine for this plant. It's a heavy feeder, and the higher the EC... Fucking... I thought that was a drop there. Shit. Where was I? Yeah, it's a heavy feeder, and if you give it high nutrient concentration, it's going to utilize those nutrients and grow more plant mass. So I'm actually just going to run this at 2.5. I've run Taro at 1 to 1.5 EC, and it does absolutely fine at low ECs as well. However, I'm going to be running it at full pelt so that the plants will grow as much plant matter as possible, which is what we're after. So here I have a pH adjuster. I know how my nutrient affects my water, so I'm going to pre-adjust my water to, you want to be between 5.5 and 6 pH for Taro. That's the perfect root zone pH. So we're going to pre-adjust our 1000 litre res, and I'm gonna add in my hydroponic nutrient. These are pre-measured bags, 1 kilogram per 1000 litres or 1 gram per litre. Part A is Campbell's Diamond White. Part B is the Nitro Cal or calcium nitrate. If you want a detailed breakdown of what is in Campbell's Diamond White, go to the hydroland.com.au site, and it actually has a detailed breakdown so that if you're not in Australia, you can match your nutrients to the ones that I'm using on the channel. You just have to find a brand with a similar breakdown of nutrition for the plants. And that's true for all of the nutrients, Campbell's Diamond Blue, White, and Diamond Spec T. So I'm just gonna add in my nutrients like so, and make sure that they're fully dissolved in my reservoir. And my millisiemens, we're at about 2.2 EC. So I'm happy with that. I can add more in if I need to or want to. You can get all the way up to 3, but these plants are tolerant across a range between 1.5 all the way up to 3. So I'm now going to turn on my hose. As you can see, our bed started filling, and I'm going to leave this to fill all the way down, and then we can add in our taro plants. So what I want to show you right now is my previous season's taro crop and the harvest of both the taro root, the corms, and the propagatable taro plants that you get from a flooded system like this. So the taro plants we're harvesting today have a rather long and convoluted history. I didn't document it as well as I would have liked because I wasn't really expecting the fantastic result that I got. So they started off in the reimagining the rain gutter grow system video, where I created a rain gutter grow system grow spike system with just a gutter that you would then bend the spikes up. And it absolutely went wild in that system, which as you can see is just exploded in growth. I'm actually very impressed at how well this system is dealing with the taro, which is just like, it's massive. Like, have a look at the size of this leaf. That is just, it's outrageous. This can be done with the grow spike technique as well as the technique I'm going to show you a bit later in the video. I then moved the taro from that system in the bagged media to a lazy man's self-watering garden. These are Japanese taro plants. They look like elephant ears, but they're not. They grow incredibly fast. I transplanted these over from in front of the studio about probably like a month and a half ago. They've taken so well to the lazy man's technique. I'm halfway through like making this garden into something, but as you can see, the rain has halted the float valve. There's obviously enough nutrients in this for these plants to be thriving though. We've got like a heap of baby plants coming off this. They kind of act a bit like an alocasia, and they throw plants kind of like just popping off so you can just collect them. I actually gave some of my plants away so I didn't harvest the roots, but I'm very excited to harvest this big fella over here. And as you can see, the plants absolutely took off, and I was able to harvest a bunch of pups from the plants, and that's how I started multiplying the taro to the point where I'm at today. These two plants went in and they absolutely powered in the lazy man's self-watering garden, and that's kind of what caught my attention. It was the ability of the plants to respond incredibly well to a consistent water level below their grow media. And that is kind of what I want to work with today. I also noticed this when I had them in my auto refilling tray systems. The plants that I put in those trays absolutely exploded, and they were descended from these two Japanese taro plants that I have in the lazy man's self-watering system. Sorry if that's quite confusing, but it took me a while to go back through the video footage to see where the lineage of the plants had come from. So these two taro got absolutely massive in this. This is the Lazy Man's self-watering garden. It's essentially a kiddie pool with a float valve and enclosure that refills from a reservoir. But I've actually let this reservoir run dry. These are well past their use by and they're pretty much ready for harvest. But as you can see, I've got a lot of small pups that I can propagate from these. And I'm going to show you what the harvest looks like from these plants when they become so large and we now have a viable root crop to harvest. So I'm going to empty this out. I've actually harvested from this one before, so it's a little bit empty. Not worried about the big plant, I'm worried about the little ones though. So I want to keep the little ones. So there we have a little baby taro, and that's going to be perfect to propagate. And you can see how it's come off a corm. That is a corm from the main plant that has budded out, and you can see here I've got another, and I'm going to collect all these because they're perfect for replanting or giving away to your friends. So here's another one. There we go. There we have another nice propagatable taro. You can see what I mean with the corms, like they're just a nodular growth, and we can crack it away from the main. And this is actually part of the root that you can harvest and eat. Here's another corm that hasn't erupted yet, but you can see the growth point, and if you plant that, that will shoot. But you can also harvest this and eat it. So you would peel it back like a potato and then cook it. Now a really sharp knife will do a better job than ripping them apart. Oh, look at that. That one's popped out from this really nice tuber. And now we can harvest all of our roots from this large plant. You can actually harvest the stem as well. So I'm going to go ahead and collect all of our tubers from our taro plant, and we can have a way of see how much this one has produced. And I've already harvested some of this. You can see how many tubers we're able to get. This is going to be a massive harvest, and that's what they look like internally. And I'm going to do the same for this one. Okay, so I've gone and harvested the first one, and I've got this full bucket of corms or tubers, and I'm going to weigh that up in a second. We'll have a full weigh in at the end. And I've also got this main stem, which is pretty much all one big tuber, so you can harvest this whole stem. Now this is obviously quite large, and I probably wouldn't recommend growing them to this size, purely for the fact that when you're going to eat all of this. However, what I want to do with the second one, because it's hydroponic, this media is going to be really easy to wash away, unlike dirt. So I want to kind of give you an idea of the structure of the stem with the corms coming off it, which will be very interesting and I haven't seen before. And have a look at all of those corms, which are harvestable food. That is super impressive, and that's all from one plant. You can see where I've cut the tubers to get the pups off this plant. So at each of these points, there would be a viable propagatable plant if you left it long enough. But that is huge. That is massive. I'm really happy with how this turned out. And this is obviously way more than I could ever eat. So my recommendation would probably be to allow the plants to get to, you know, a more reasonable size in smaller pots, like the ones I'll be repotting all of the pups from these ones into. And to harvest our stem, we just take the top off the plant, like so, and take it back to the root material where it stops looking like leaf material. It's a bit of a hard line to draw, but you'll find it. Just take off all the roots Now, what I actually don't want to do here is pretend like I know what I'm doing. This is the first time I've ever harvested taro. So if you have any advice or constructive criticism, let me know in the comments below. And if you have a really good description of how to harvest the root ball, I'll pin that comment for other people to see. All right, this is the second one. Take that plant off the top. Now, just be careful when handling these plants because some of the cultivars, see that sap that's coming out the top there? That's actually filled with calcium oxalate, which can actually be a skin irritant and is toxic. So these plants must be cooked before you eat any part of them to disable that calcium oxalate. Okay, so here I have beside me the harvest from 2 taro plants. Obviously not these 2 taro plants, but what I want to do now is I want to weigh it all up. I want to give you an idea of the corm harvest and the root or the stalk harvest from the plant. First plant, 8.5 kilos of corm, and the stalk, 8.2 kilo. Plant 2 is 8.2 kilo of corm and 5.35 kilo of the root. So all up, that means that between the 2 plants, we got 30 kilos of edible starchy root. That's actually a fantastic harvest, especially considering these plants look amazing while they're producing. You could have these around the prettiest house in the world. You could sneak these productive plants past the most discerning ornamental plant enthusiast, and as long as you can sneak them away for harvest, they'll never know. All right, let me split one of these in half to show you what's inside the root, and then I'm going to show you how you can grow them at home like this. Let's cut this down the middle and I'll show you what's inside. There it is. That is one big root tuber. How good is that? That's beautiful. All right, now that you've seen the inside of the taro root, I'm going to show you how you can propagate them at home, just like I have. Let's repot those pups. So the media I'm using today is a 70-30 cocoa perlite mix. I rehydrated the cocoa with Campbell's Diamond White that I mixed up in watering cans and just poured over the cocoa. I'm just shoveling this into terracotta pots. Now, the reason I'm using terracotta pots is that terracotta breathes and it allows water to evaporate off the surface. You get exchange of oxygen and you also get a evaporative cooling effect from the outside of the pots, which cools the temperature of the root ball. Now, you will get some green algae form on the outside of the pot, but that just doesn't make a difference to the grow whatsoever. The pot size is somewhat important because you want to give them enough room to corm and to create a large stem for the plant that you can harvest. You can just upgrade the size of the pots as you go if you don't want to purchase all large pots to begin with, or you can plant small plants immediately into large pots with the future in mind. And we've multiplied our taro by a lot. And now that our taro hydroponic system has finished filling, we can take our taro plants over and put them in our system. Even Butcherbird approves. Hey, buddy. And there we have all of our taro ready for a bumper crop in our new flooded taro hydroponic system. Now, this is very similar to my float tray hydroponic system that I had taro in originally, and the results from that system were that you can expect a plant about this size to grow into a plant about that size within 3 months. It has been almost exactly 3 months, in fact 2 days less than 3 months, but this is an incredible system for watering larger plants. The terracotta pots have done absolutely incredible handling the nutrient uptake for the plants, and as you can see, and some of our plants are even exploring down into our reservoirs. So I added in some extra taros, and you can see these 2 plants here, they are the original taro plants, the original Japanese taro, and they are absolutely massive. So with regards to the hydroton, the clay balls that I put in it originally, I found that they interfered with the float valves too much, so I ended up just removing it completely. And in this scenario, there's actually no evidence of algae in these systems. However, you may in full sun get a little bit of algae, but it's really not the end of the world. Some of them have even started popping off, and these ones over here definitely need to be moved to a larger system. So I just quickly want to show you the roots that are developed within these pots. All right, there it is. Have a go at that. That is a healthy root ball. I really like these plants, so I don't want to do too much damage. Ugh. Do the same here. One is almost escaping, so I probably need to repot this soon anyway. Yeah, have a look at that. That is an incredible root ball. This plant is absolutely loving this system. And you can see at the bottom there's no evidence that the water level is negatively impacting this plant at all. The results were really, really positive, and this is an identical system of nutrient delivery. And for most people, once your taros have grown to about this size, this is going to be when you want to harvest them. So you can move your taro from small to large within this system and just shuffle them along pots if you like, or you can just have all large pots to begin with, and as they mature, harvest the roots of the plants, then replant the corms as well as the pups that pup off from the plants at the large end of your system. So I can hear the comments before I even post this video. What am I going to do about mosquitoes? I don't have a mosquito problem in the area that I'm in. I don't get mosquito larvae in any of the float trays, and I have had very, very little algal growth in the float trays as well. I'll let you know if there are any algae or mosquito problems in future updates as we watch this system progress and the plants in it. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Hoochos. Happy hydroponicking, and I'll see you next time on Hoochos. So this video actually became rather long, and I had to omit a fair bit of the cultural importance of taro and the history of the cultivation of taro. So what I've done is I've put that into a companion podcast, and that will be linked here along with my revolutionary new method of growing ginger and turmeric, which I think you'll also like if you enjoyed this video.